Thank you.
Are we working? Yes, we are. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with the afternoon here at the Water for Climate Pavilion. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ingrid Timbo. I am the Deputy Executive Director at the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, and it's my privilege to welcome you all to this session called Building Transformational Resilience, Systems Approaches for Climate and Water Management. This event is co-organized by my organization, AGWA, by UNESCO, UNICEF, and also WMO. And also just to say, there are headphones. If you have a hard time hearing, you can use the headphones and you can turn them to channel 8, I believe. And just make sure that the volume is turned up because sometimes it's not. So anyways, so just a couple of opening thoughts to get us started. So I don't need to tell anybody in the Water Pavilion about this, but we know that the hydrological system underpins life on Earth and provides a very tangible example of what it means to work systemically. All aspects of the water system are interconnected, from condensation to precipitation to infiltration, discharge, and evapotranspiration. Water is one element distributed across our planet to benefit all living things. Making a change in one area, such as the destruction of the Amazon rainforest or the melting of the Greenland ice sheet, and you see the impacts across the globe. It's dynamic and it works in feedback loops. Resilience thinking operates from a similar point of understanding. Building resilience involves looking at interconnections within and beyond systems, identifying points of breakdown, breakthrough, reorganization, growth, and reassessment. There is no end state to resilience. It is dynamic and fluid, you might say. So for water, climate change is intensifying these feedback loops, creating new uncertainties that coincide with long-standing water management challenges, such as access, equity, overuse, degradation, and land use change. We humans are very good at segmenting ourselves into sectors and subsectors, creating barriers between the various aspects of our economies and society. Meanwhile, all of our economic activity, our health, our food systems, they're all dependent on water. we have a finite quantity of water, and there are inherent trade-offs between different users that must be considered at a more systemic level. This is why we at Agua are working to better integrate water into national level planning with ministries of finance and planning, as well as with central banks, to ensure a whole of economy approach to water management. This roundtable explores how systems approaches to water can build transformational resilience across sectors and scales, bridging the gap between research, policy, and practice. Today's speakers will explore real-world applications from city resilience planning and sustainable agriculture to inclusive governance and youth-led innovation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to today's moderator, Stefan Uhlenbrook from WMO, to get us going. Thanks, Stefan. And thanks, everyone, for being here and online.
Thank you. Thank you, Ingrid. Colleagues, friends, good afternoon. My name is Stefan Uhlenbrook. I work for the World Meteorological Organization, and I'm happy to moderate this panel today. Ingrid set us up, and she talked about the importance of the water cycle dynamics, which are changing rapidly, very rapidly. And these are interlinked to other sectors and scales, as I think she said that as well. And I think particularly challenging is that water often connects different sectors, including the agriculture and food systems, the energy systems, but also the ecosystems and all its services. How these interconnect, we will hear in a number of case studies this afternoon. We actually have the chance to listen to a number of very leading experts from the science, policy, operational services, including use, and we will listen to their practices and some real-world applications. But before we have our two panels, it's a pleasure to invite Koen Verbiest. Koen works for the UNESCO. His PowerPoint is already illustrated. We don't see you yet, Koen, but I assume you're online. And over to you to your PowerPoint on tools and thinking for a systems approach. Now we see Koen to verify it's him, and we are looking forward to your presentation. Thank you. Over.
Thanks so much, Stefan, and I hope you can hear me. I'm just going to share my screen here, so hopefully that works smoothly. And if that's good, then I'm good to go. Right. So I just wanted to highlight a little bit how UNESCO is supporting the catalyzing of systems approaches for water and climate resilience. And it's a pleasure to be with you here from cold Paris. I think you're in a better place than I am at the moment. And just to start off, I would like just to take one step and ask, why do we need systems thinking in the first place? And I think just to recap that, we all know, of course, that stationarity is dead, meaning that we really have to manage a different world, a world where we don't know the past to predict the future. So in this sense, we're actually moving from present conditions where we know what we can expect to a situation with a lot of more uncertainty, but also potential variability in our scenarios. So one approach we've been taking at UNESCO is to address climate change adaptation through systems thinking. And this was actually why Climate Risk Informed Decision Analysis, or CRIDA, was initiated in 2018. Really trying to work with communities to identify, together with them through a bottom-up approach, what are the key challenges they're facing today, but also how we can approach more, let's say, systems thinking in their actions, talking about climate change impact. And over the last 7 years, we've been implementing CRIDA in about 25 countries and growing, and actually addressing several challenges related to droughts, floods, sea level rise, but also more recently glacial lake outburst floods, groundwater extraction challenges. So really understanding how all these things fit together. And just two examples of that I would like to bring to you. One is an earlier example from Zambia, where actually you can see that even on issues related to water treatment, for example, in Lusaka, we found that climate change affects both the water and energy supply differently. And so really by looking at how it affects the hydropower reservoir operations, we need to understand how we propose adaptation options that address it through a flexible multi-purpose approach. So that's also where the CRIDA approach has been used for. And more recently, of course, we're looking at both optimizing not just the water availability when we're looking at adaptation to current and future challenges, but also how to optimize at the same time for co-benefits to safeguard ecological process, to really bring in nature-based solutions, not just to address the water challenges, but also looking at ecological challenges and how community members can actually benefit from this co-optimization of different processes at the same time. And then just the second part of why we think we need to go for systems thinking is actually that the water cycle is, I would say, still largely absent from the solution space to address climate change impacts. And I think here, the focus on greenhouse gas emissions actually has reduced a little bit the solutions pool. And it actually also excludes most of society to address these challenges. And we need to really find better ownership of the problem of climate change and also bring communities more on board. You see that also, for example, in IPCC processes, the R6, it's a lot of talking about climate change impacts on the water cycle, but less about how the water cycle can also be a potential solution. And as you also mentioned, there is a need to also look at land use changes that are compounding our climate change impacts and really managing the full water cycle more actively. And you see a lot of papers more recently also looking at that and the critical need for transdisciplinary efforts that also look at the decreasing freshwater availability compared to the attention given to the carbon cycle. So really this is where I think the more recent thinking about the green water paradigm shift comes in for climate action, highlighting the role of an altered water cycle that is accelerating climate change impacts. And an example, of course, is the extreme flooding in Valencia, where actually we see both the warming of the Mediterranean Sea, but also the land use changes that actually also compounding those impacts, and specifically deforestation that you also highlighted. And as a result, we know that are leading to that compound impact. And they're not only about the warming, but they're also about land use changes and changes in the water cycle that need to be addressed. And these actually provide an opportunity for the whole of society engagement to address the climate crisis. So really providing communities a local agency to address some of the key climate change challenges that are facing. So this is actually something that we feel has an opportunity to shift our thinking and bringing this more systematic thinking of how we should address the challenges. And a second part of the green water paradigm shift is about thinking about the global water sources and sinks in climate change adaptation and mitigation, where atmospheric moisture recycling we know plays a large role and needs to be taken more integrated into systems thinking. We talk about the flying rivers concept and the importance of our rainforest, but also the concept of precipitation sheds, where basically we look at the different fluxes that are feeding into our watersheds. So here also the green water paradigm shift is about considering the key water resources that are highly transboundary in nature, specifically through atmospheric processes, which are often overlooked and also absent from current adaptation processes. We often look at local adaptation, but we don't consider always where the moisture is coming from and how we can actually enhance or restore those moisture processes that are also affecting our impact of climate change, a compound impact for climate, but also from the altered water cycle. And again, just to finalize, I know I have only a few minutes, just to invite you also to an online and physical green water dialogue that will be held in a few weeks in Paris, specifically talking about the importance of green water in the global water agenda, also integrating green water into the water and climate governance, and also preparing a publication where we start to put down the understanding of what green water can do for an integrated climate and water management, and really looking at the untapped potential of green water in our current dialogue and climate and water governance. So with that, I just invite you warmly and also wish you a great session to deliberate further. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Koen. We have time for a question, one or two. I'm looking at the audience. We have actually an audience. You might not see this, but we have a couple of colleagues who are very interested. You can, okay. If there's no question, then I allow myself. Jorge has a question, please.
Hi, I'm George Werneck from Brazil, from Embrapa, and I heard you talking about the global fluxes of water and talking about a lot about forests. And what about the ocean? That's the question.
Right. No, of course, we're talking about the global water cycle, and I think we often consider let's say, boundary conditions. But actually, the only boundary condition we have is our planet. And I think we have often looked more at local solutions. And again, as you see, a lot of the water coming, of course, from the ocean. So we need to really understand better what are the impacts of climate change, impacts on the ocean. And I mentioned the case of the Mediterranean Sea, which is also heating up. So I think there is certainly a need to broaden up our scope and not just focus only on local problems, but also looking at how these global processes, including that of the water cycle and the changes there, affect us. And actually in the AR6, we see that there is really mention of the fact that the water cycle isn't very well represented in our understanding of the global and future changes of climate. So this also means that there is a space for further integrating that in our current thinking. This is also where I think systems thinking can play a big role.
Thank you. Is there another question? We have time for one more. Then otherwise, I have a question, and I think there's no doubt that land use changes impact the precipitation and evaporation, as you indicated in one of your slides. But then you made the link to the Valencia flooding from last November. Do you think the land use change and evaporation changes on the land has had impact on the rainfall generation for this extreme event, or is it more for other type of events?
Right. So basically, the thinking is that it's not just on that specific event. It's just that in the past, with more evapotranspiration happening, there was enough pull from the land to actually create rainfall in the season, which as a result reduced the amount of vapor over the Mediterranean Sea, and such it could reduce the power of these big storms in later seasons. So in some way, because of these changes, a lot of the moisture stays over the sea and does not really fall as gentle rainfalls, and becomes more of terrifying storms that actually affect communities much worse.
Okay, thank you very much. Good. I don't see a last question. Then again, a big hand to Koen. Thank you for this presentation.
Thank you so much, Stefan. See you later.
Good. We now continue with two panels, and I first put for the first panel, which is entitled to Systems Thinking Lessons Learned from Various Sectors. It's a pleasure to invite Mr. Jorge Werneck Lima from the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, Embrapa. Please, Jorge, may I invite you to take a seat here in the front row. Next panelist will be Professor Anuka Santalzo Arnio. Oh, mispronounced your name, Anuka. I'm so sorry. She's a professor at the Department for Energy and Mechanical Engineering at Aalto University in Finland. Do we have Antonius Kolimeriakas in the audience? No, he didn't arrive yet. Then we hand over to Mr. Greenwald Machacha. He works for the International Water Management Institute in Pretoria, South Africa, where he's the deputy country representative. Good to have you, Greenwald. Colleagues, overall title is Lessons Learned from Various Sectors. I will just invite you one after the other. Now we have your names also on the display. One after the other to briefly present your sectors, energy, research, agricultural engineering, when we discuss about system thinking, particularly with the link to water. Can we, according to that order, Jorge, would you like to start, please? Over.
Thank you, Stefan. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Agua, for the invitation. Thank you, Ivan, for the organization of the whole pavilion here. And well, I was thinking what I'm going to talk about in this session about system approach. I can tell a little bit about my life working as a hydrologist here in Brazil. I started working in a farm, in a very small farm with only 36,000 hectares, with 3,000 hectares under irrigation with 20 kind of crops. After that, I went to the electrical power sector. They hired me to analyze the conflicts between water for agriculture and water for energy. And then I went at Embrapa and I started to work very focused on water for agriculture. And then I went to Adasa where I worked with water and sanitation. So it's like a nexus and different sectors involved and connections between all of them. Because at ADASA I was responsible for the water management, and we have to provide water for all the sectors, and sometimes we have conflicts. Water is a big problem, and it's good when you know a lot about the other, or if you have some knowledge about different sectors, because everything is connected and everything is connected through water. Everybody needs a lot of water, and then you need to put yourself in the side of as the other sectors and different sectors. I was also president of the watershed committee, and after all I went to the environmental institution where we need to deal with water and environment too. So, and water management and environmental policy, where you have many other subjects to study and to analyze when you are dealing with water, not only the way we, the water guys, we look at water. So, as you can see, and we need to assume and consider that water is not only a problem of the water people, of the people that works with water. It was very clear during the pandemic that water is very connected to health. So it's interesting to see how many things we need to have in mind when dealing with water, and we can talk about economy and whatever. Water is connected with everything, and we need to hurt everyone and to put everyone together. We have some projects here in Brazil involving federal government, state government, NGOs, and different companies, private sector, companies from the state, water and sanitation companies, hydroelectricity companies, but today it's not only that. We have other kind of energy being produced, and the discussion about water is everywhere. So again, the systemic approach is like we are discussing this in different environments, that it's the next step of the integrated water resource management. It's very integrated, it's systemic, it's holistic, and to solve the real problems that we have connected to water, we need to have this systemic view, the nexus view, and others, so we can deal with that adequately to solve really and to make a good impact in the life of people. That's it for the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. So in the second round, we want to hear some concrete examples, if possible. Yeah. So okay, good. Hey, now over to energy, and it's now a pleasure to invite Anuka. I hope it's fine if I pigeonhole you as the energy representative in this panel today.
Sure. Okay. Good afternoon for everyone as well from my side. So, of course, water is energy, so as well for us. So now when we are here all gathered at the COP30. It's very interesting when we're talking about phasing out fossil fuels. When we're talking about phasing out fossil fuels, the reality is that we have to have something else instead. So how are we going to produce the clean energy for all the people on the globe? So then we are, of course, bringing in, for instance, renewable energy technologies like wind and solar, but also hydro. And as we know that the wind and solar are intermittent, which means that they sometimes are there and sometimes are not there, so they are not base power. However, hydropower is kind of a base load, so we can use that more flexibly than what we can use of wind power or solar power. And that's what makes it kind of very interesting also from the energy sector point of view. However, water has, of course, significant other implications, so we can't just use it as we want to. But its role into the energy sector will also have an important role, and that's kind of something systematic that would be a very good idea to keep in mind.
Thank you, clear statement. We continue with the panel, and we hand over to Dr. Greenwell Machaya, sorry for this, bring us the South African perspective.
Right, okay, so my name is Greenwell Machaya. I think my presentation will be around Malawi. I'm based in South Africa, though. So I do work with the International Water Management Institute, and we have one program called the Joint Transition for Water Security that we are implementing together with our partners in the UK. One institution is called ARUP, the other one is called Detares from the Netherlands, and the other one is AGUA. Now, within that program, we have sub-programs. One of them is called the Water Resilience Tracker, and I think it's its work that I'm going to make reference to here. With that work, we are focusing on Malawi, and there the core purpose is that we want to try and mainstream water into decision-making, into policies, financing, etc. And especially under our program, then, we're trying to say that there's no way we can win in Malawi in terms of transforming that kind of sphere without recognizing the importance of the system's approach to decision making. The first studies that we had in Malawi already showed that there was some kind of still siloed approach to making decisions, to financing, etc., etc. And as a result, we're saying, okay, in order maybe to start changing this, we need to already start encouraging the kind of joint decision making. So there are some two processes that we have contributed to, which I think I want to highlight. The first part is that we were asked by the government to work on the Water National Adaptation Plan indicators. Now, ourselves, realizing that it's important to approach it from a systems perspective, we didn't think that we should only do it with the Ministry of Water and Natural Resources of the time, but rather we needed to deliberately include not only that ministry, but also Ministry of Natural Resources, Energy and Mining, Climate Change, as well as National Planning Commission. So together we analyzed some of those indicators, made contributions, strengthened them, etc. And today, those indicators reflect the diversity of stakeholders that should be there, thereby already trying to put into practice the Nexus approach or the systems kind of thinking. There's also another process which we're encouraging and supporting. Every sector within a government tries to do reviews of what they do, and sometimes they also plan for the work ahead. In most cases, that planning as well as the review is it looks at the world as one department, but what we're saying is that let's start approaching that from a systems perspective. So instead of Minister of Water alone, can we please do it together with the other relevant ministries? So we have a process there called Joint Sector Review for the water sector, which we are supporting, and through that one, we are encouraging the ministry and department of water,
but what we're saying is that let's start approaching that from a systems perspective. So instead of Minister of Water alone, can we please do it together with the other relevant ministries? So we have a process there called Joint Sector Review for the water sector, which we are supporting, and through that one, we are encouraging that
you are making in one sector, which have an application in another, they easily get support. Whereas if you exclude the others, you are likely going to also find resistance at some point. So if the Minister of Finance, for example, does not know that if you strengthen M&E in one sector, you are also going to have knock-on effects in another sector, they might not value your effort. But the moment you bring everyone together, they will start saying, oh, okay, I think this is something that is worthwhile. I think in that respect, we are already winning and therefore promoting the systems approach. Thanks much.
Thank you, Greenwell. It's actually where we talk so much about water, and it's literally falling on the roof for the online colleagues, so it's a bit challenging on our side to understand each other because it's so noisy because of the rainfall. Anyway, we continue, and it's now a pleasure to invite Dr. Antonis Kolimenakis. Antoni came a little late, but he's an officer at the World Health Organization, particularly looking at climate change and health. Antonis, make the link to water and health and climate and health, particularly how public health and water supply and sanitation features here, please.
Yeah, thank you so much. And first of all, I apologize for the delay. First thing to emphasize is that the human life depends on water. So we can presumably understand the importance of the issue in relation to health. But when it comes also to climate, the nexus of climate, health, and water, there are specific repercussions that and health challenges and diseases that are caused through this nexus, like, for example, cholera, diarrhea. Of course, it is highly linked to different nutritional parameters when there is droughts and lack of water. And in this respect, WHO has been supporting for several years, both through guidance, but as well as direct support to countries through its mandate, to support, for example, the establishment of climate resilient water safety and sanitation plans, or climate resilient WASH. But of course, through other important frameworks like the so-called operational framework, which is an umbrella framework that includes different aspects related to different health parameters. I would also like to maybe touch on a couple of things. The first is that it is really important that we view this issue from a holistic approach and a multi-sectoral approach. Because, for example, we have several countries in which we support the establishment of early warning systems for water-induced diseases like cholera and diarrhea. And in order for this to become operational, we need to make sure that we have a good collaboration among the ministries of health, the research ministry of water, in that case, but as well as the med services. So we understand that this is an issue in which we need to enhance the correct governance structures for ensuring that we have these holistic and systemic approaches that we are discussing here. Also related to the NAP. The NAP, the formulation of the national adaptation plans in countries, is constituted by different departments. So we need to ensure that there is a good collaboration so that to include those different priorities for countries and to ensure a collaboration and the full addressing of what priorities are. Maybe one more thing to mention is that some examples that we currently have on the global scene. I think one of the most apparent ones is the currently negotiated last list of indicators under the Global Goal on Adaptation, in which we have the different indicators for different sectors, like we have the water sector and the health sector, along with the other sectors that are actually represented. And I would like to emphasize that there are many cross-cutting issues. So again, there is no other way than to view that from a multi-sectoral holistic approach if we want to ensure policies that are sustainable and policies that are really responding to the needs and the specific vulnerabilities in different country settings. I will finish by saying that through WHO we have created a mechanism which is called ATTACH. This is the Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health, in which more than 100 countries have committed, and in which there are different task teams and thematic groups that address different issues. So the water issues are very well represented, both in terms of resilience as well as different aspects, in order to ensure that the country's perspectives are well heard and addressed. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's important that we talk, but it's also good to listen to the audience if you have specific questions. So I'm happy to hand over if you have any questions. We have eminent, knowledgeable colleagues here in the panel. If you have any questions. If not, we do a quick round. And, all of you, it's very impressive to listen to your perspectives from the sectors, and everybody was stressing the importance of integrated, holistic approaches, and Tony's just made the point. I was involved in a paper with colleagues a couple of years back, and we analyzed for the water, food, energy ecosystem nexus. There are a couple of thousand papers we analyzed with some literature-based analysis, and more than 70% of the papers were written by hydrology people, or people from the water sector, and it's always kind of water-centric. Why is that like this? So why don't we have water, food, energy, food nexus or health nexus sessions at energy conferences or at health conferences, or maybe we have and we use different terminology, or also at the agricultural sector. We know the critical importance of water for agriculture and food security. I think it's clear. But why is that often so water-centric? Do you have any ideas, or can you help me? Or maybe we just use different terminologies. Jorge, please.
Well, I think that at the end we are the water management, water managers, the people that thinks on that every day, and water is the connection element of all of this. So, and sometimes it's good to have us doing this kind of analysis, because we can do I think most of the time. A more technical analysis with less passion and more good information and knowledge to take the decision, and it helps on the solution of the case when you have knowledge behind. Otherwise, people will be fighting forever. It seems that because they are defending their business here, and it's legitimate. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's part of the process and part of the game. So I think that's one possible reason to have this kind of discussion. I've seen in so many places people discussing like this and with no solutions, and only when we have a common objective and someone that can take the decisions from a different perspective, connecting everybody, like the watershed committees and others. But I will keep here, not to
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anuka, you want to come in, please?
Yeah. Yes, of course. So it's good to remember that when we're talking about multidisciplinary research, then often we actually use different vocabulary at different fields. So it might be that depending on what kind of keywords you've been using, is that you'll find people from your own field who are talking about the topic. And even if we're talking about similar thing, we could still utilize different keywords and different kind of phrasing, and therefore we might not find it. Maybe energy sector, hydropower hasn't been a very big role in the previous rounds. Of course, it's always been there, but the research around hydro energy has not been very strong. But I think that it will become now more important for the future in the coming years. So it might be also a possibility that the quantity of scientific publications around the topic will actually increase in the future, and hopefully it will also include more kind of sustainability concerns as well.
Thank you very much. Other ideas how we can bring in sectors more equally on equal footing, as we like to say. Greenwell, please.
I think when you talk about all these climate change impacts, etc., it's not an exaggeration to say that water is at the center of that. But I think as we try to advance that, we need to take a deliberate effort to also bring in views from elsewhere. It's only if we do that we can easily win. Because if you just leave the conversation for, say, water engineers or hydrologists or one kind of group of people, you find that in order to win, you need money from the Minister of Finance. I always use this because it's really something that happens at the country level. You have something that you believe in so much and you feel like this is really everything. If we sort this out, we win. But then you go to the Minister of Finance and they tell the Minister of Water and say, okay, but if we do that, how do we win in terms of money? Okay? Did you do some kind of economic modeling? Oh, okay, we did some modeling, but okay, what are the multipliers? Okay, and if you don't have answers to that, you find that you lose out. So you need to be able to combine fields deliberately, and that has to be deliberate. I think that's what I would say. Deliberately bring in a coalition of experts within the field to make it not a sector thing, but a systems thing.
Thank you. Over to Antonis, but if any question from the audience, feel free to raise your hand. We are happy to give you the word. Antonio.
Yeah, I just want to pick from Greenwell's point. I think it was very targeted. And if we really want to be a bit self-critical, there is also something we need to address together like sectors, which is the competition among sectors, and specifically when it comes to financing. So I think one approach to ensure that the flow of funding really is directed to the needs of the specific sectors is to ensure a better collaboration. And I must say that Traditionally, at least in what concerns WHO, there is many years of collaboration with UNICEF, for example, and the water people for the glass reports and the different monitoring procedures. So I think that through this approach, we will ensure that we sustainably address the needs as they come up, and that we reduce this competition specifically in times where the climate resources are really not the adequate ones to address the different problems.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience. Let me go there.
Sorry, I came a bit late, so I may not have got everything, but I have a question that is related to the hydropower and as a kind of solution for in the climate, in the times of climate mitigation, because, and I wanted to ask, when you spoke about the kind of, about Antonio spoke about the kind of competition between the different sectors, that of course we think about the mining sector. So we know a lot of cases, for example, in my country, in Finland, where mining has polluted waters in a very, very severe way, and I understand that this is a very global phenomenon. And so I just wonder how you integrate the kind of this aspect of mitigation, where certain ways of green transition are actually very, very polluting or have a big danger of polluting waters and destroying everything you were talking about.
I think the hydropower question was for Anuka, please.
Yeah. Yes. So yes, that's another kind of an aspect of the kind of the pure waters and water purification as well. So. So the mining sector, like not all mining sector is only for green transition. So of course the green transition will increase the kind of the need for certain different minerals that we are having. But that's kind of one of the reasons why, for instance, recycling becomes very important, because we have to get the recyclability of those materials back, because we can't afford to increase endlessly the primary production of the materials. Yes, also the purity and purifying the waters and kind of how do we utilize as the water as overall resources is very kind of a large question as well.
Good. Greenwell, last comment and then we move on.
Maybe a very short one. So in Malawi, where I come from, about 3 months ago, I think they just changed the ministry. They redefined them. So they have combined part of the water sector with the energy, mining, etc. I think part of that is not only to reduce costs of running this, but also to try to encourage the joint planning, etc. So that if you're in mining, you need water, but you can also pollute it. And if water people are there, they're likely going to have a conversation, which in the end, you might bring out the trade-offs more readily and maybe try to compromise on or to come to terms in terms of how you resolve some of those issues. So I think it's partly a governance issue, really. And the joint planning between sectors might already go some way towards resolving some of those.
And when you don't have any other way, you have to compensate that. So that's what's happening in the environmental institutions, to calculate and to see how you can. Everybody wants this. So for this we need mining, and you need water. So let's see how can we compensate at least for local people and in other scales.
Good, thank you. Then we give a big hand to our remaining 3 panelists. Thank you very much. It was very insightful. And we have a second panel. And I would now like to invite Jorge Alvarez Salva. We do a picture. Onliners, wait a minute, we have a picture time. Thank you. So we have a second panel now, which focuses on inclusiveness and how can we ensure that the systems approach is also inclusive. And I would like to invite Mr. Jorge Alvarez Salva, I think Jorge is online. Is that correct? Yeah, I hope he's there. We have Ellie Bispo from the youth. He's the youth representative group, Youth Groundwater Network. Is Ellie here? He's stuck in the rain and coming in 5 minutes. Let's see. And it's a pleasure to have Ms. Reta Toivanen. I hope I've mispronounced it. Professor Toivanen is at the Department of Cultures at the University of Helsinki in Finland. Jorge, can we see you? Now, here you are. Thank you. So, it's about inclusion. And I would like to start with Jorge, please. Jorge works for UNICEF as a WASH specialist. And it's about systems approach. How can they be inclusive? What can we learn from your experiences at UNICEF in the WASH sector? Please.
Thank you. Well, I hope I see myself in the screen. I hope you can hear me all well.
We see and hear you. Yes.
Fantastic. So when we talk about systems approaches, we need to think about policies, institutional arrangements, finance, data, regulation, service providers, communities, ecosystems, and how they interact. So equity becomes real when it's built into how system works, not just how individual projects or individual organizations operate. So allow me to point out two basic recommendations. The first one is data. If you don't see who is being left behind in your data, your systems will keep leaving them behind in practice. So making sure that data reflects those left behind is very important. We need to build evidence on the impacts of climate and WASH services and systems. But information needs to be disaggregated because the most vulnerable groups are often also the most impacted by climate change. So using disaggregated data and risk analysis, so for instance, combining WASH coverage with poverty, gender, disability, indigenous status, climate hazard maps is very important. And tools like the GWP UNICEF Strategic Framework for WASH Climate Resilient Development already calls for this in the first quadrant, in the understanding the problem, including who is exposed and who is least served. There is also some ongoing global monitoring work, as you might have heard this week, on climate resilient WASH by the JMP and GLASS, and also the introduction in the Global Colonial Adaptation Framework, which stress integrating equity and differential vulnerability in policy. The second point, I will be brief, is giving voice and power to the most vulnerable groups. So systems are not just pipes and plants, they're relationships and power dynamics. So system strengthening is most equitable when it is consciously bringing right holder organizations, women's group, organizations of persons with disabilities, youth and indigenous communities. Now, this COP is being highlighted in mainstream media as the COP with a large presence of indigenous communities, which is, I believe, true. Now, the question is, does this physical presence of those groups in a big conference like the COP ensures that the voices are heard? So vulnerable groups need to be in the table, not in the menu. We often talk about vulnerable groups, but without them on the table. And this applies to youth, people living with disabilities, etc., etc. So creating the spaces and giving them not only voice, but also empowerment is critical, in particular in the adaptation agenda. Because a systems approach that ignores power will reproduce inequity. And a systems approach that redistributes voice will correct it. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for stressing also the importance of data monitoring, etc. I would now like to invite Professor Reta Toivanen. Rita, can we have you on stage? Thank you. Rita, it's often said that cultural or the human cultural ethical dimensions are often overlooked. First, you as a professor of culture, is that true? And what do we need to do better in systems design?
So hello everybody, and nice to see you all here in COP. I come from Finland, and I think I'm will bring a few Arctic examples for you to this discussion. I work myself in the Arctic with the Sami indigenous peoples and with local people, and I thought that my examples might answer somehow the question by telling you that when we talk about the systems approach, I would like to instead maybe use a holistic approach. I suppose in my way of thinking, the systems approach and the holistic approach are synonyms. But I say holistic approach because I think that certain stakeholders understand through that word the idea that we would need to see things from different perspectives and different points of view and different ways of imagining a future that is fossil-free. And in the case of Arctic area in Fenno-Scandinavia, Finland, Sweden and Norway, we have several cases where we have had a kind of coalition between interest for green energy and clean energy and a kind of idea of just transition. And at the same time, this project had impacted very severely the lives of the local people, indigenous peoples. And when I say severely, I mean especially projects like hydropower project that we had in Norway in the 70s and in Finland already in the 50s, where we were kind of taming big rivers, and not only taming the rivers but also flooding huge areas of land. And those lands were very important for the local Sami people, for their reindeer herding, for their hunting, for their gathering, for their fishing. And this hydropower project, in a way, when they flooded places of life, and they also flooded away a lot of language, a lot of culture, a lot of identity. And in a way, it feels that we have not learned much from those times, even till we pretend we have, because today we have several kind of similar projects that are aimed at producing electricity for all of us, mines that have similarly kind of will have a severe impact on the people's local lives of the people. And when I asked the question about pollution of waters or the use of waters in mining, which is quite a huge amount of water that must run through the mining, but there's also the other aspect that the mines, when they come and they last 7 to 15 years, and then they leave behind them a devastation. And very often these happen exactly in places that are very, very important in winter for the reindeers for eating, lichen and getting food, but also when we have the destruction of land, it means that the kind of routes of the reindeers are changing, and life gets, for the reindeer herders, very unpredictable. So when we think about all these kind of aspects of how to produce clean energy, and we say holistic systems thinking, we should also use this word holistic thinking. Maybe that I leave it there, and I have some other examples if we have time.
Thank you very much. We have some more time in the next round, but it's good to have different voices. Did Miss Ellie Dispo arrive already? No. He or she is still out in the rain, literally. Good, then we go back to Jorge, if you don't mind. Jorge, in your first intervention, you stressed the importance of data. You reminded us on the important work that UNICEF is doing with WHO when it comes to the JMP program, the GLASS program, etc. What are the opportunities to better integrate also this understanding of data about the situation when it comes to water supply and sanitation into the educational systems to better strengthen the climate resilient planning? Is that a clear question? Over to you, please.
Sure. Well, schools are where climate, water, and children's rights collide, right? If school systems and water systems plan together for climate resilience, we protect not only learning, but also their lives. In many countries, moreover, in many countries, schools are not only educational centers, but also shelters during extreme weather events. So I have a couple of recommendations as well in this area. First, we need to invest in climate resilient washing schools. That's obvious. There is a new strategic framework for climate resilient washing schools, which was published last month, which already calls for a systems-wide approach, aligning policies, monitoring, budgeting, teacher training, and community engagement, and builds up on the GWP UNICEF framework that I mentioned in my previous answer. A school should not be called climate resilient if children do not have safe water, toilets, and washing that still work when there are storms or droughts. So the previous point is even more important because, as I said earlier, schools are often shelters, and schools could become more resilient hubs for communities. So integrating washing schools and education systems in climate planning would mean that the designs are able to meet the emergency loads, that there are backup water sources and safe storage for an emergency sanitation, and using schools as channels for early warning and community communication. Children often can help spreading messages, several messages, including early warning. So we could define a climate resilient school as one that protects children 5 days a week during working days and protects the wider community when disaster strikes. But beyond the infrastructures, there is a clear opportunity to improve community resilience, not just in WASH, but helping the next generation to understand better the impacts of climate change. And what is more important, to adapt. So the second area, which I think is very important beyond the infrastructures and services, is considering schools as centers of climate literacy. So UNICEF Green Schools, for instance, are an example of, and similar initiatives are examples of how curricula can combine environmental education, climate science, water security, and hygiene to really build a generation of climate literate students that will help fight into climate change adaptation and mitigation. So if we get this right, every investment in a climate resilient school would become what I would say a triple win. So children's learning for their health and dignity, and also for community resilience in this changing climate. Over to you, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Jorge. Now, I personally, if I may, I fully agree that how critically important it is to invest in children education. The return on investment is very difficult to quantify, but I have no doubt that it is a very positive return on investment. Very difficult to express in monetary terms, but I fully agree. Therefore, we appreciate your efforts to bring this to the youngest generation. Going back to Rita, I hope I pronounced it correctly. Rita, the human rights framework is important. Of course, I work for the UN, I have to say that, and not only because I have to say that, I strongly believe in it, but how can it really help us to enhance inclusivity? How can it help us in this systems approach? Well, you invited us to rather speak about an holistic approach, but how does the human rights-based framework help to make a step forward here? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's a big question. I think that now when we had our colleagues speaking from the UNICEF side, I think it's a good momentum to stop and ask the question that what do children, people with disabilities, indigenous people and women have together when we think about the sustainability development goals? The same thing, they are almost ignored in the whole sustainability development goals setting. Even to the whole Agenda 2030 is said to be based on kind of universal human rights and the leaving no one behind. So we have only a few indicators that even mention children and indigenous peoples and women and people with disabilities with this kind of summarized line. We don't have any indicators that would be specifically looking at children or indigenous people or even human rights in the kind of more concrete way. So this is my first criticism to the whole sustainability development goals setting and the Agenda 2030, that I hope that when we now slowly start thinking about the future of the sustainability goals, there will be a big change, and the change will come from us, from people, to say that the agenda will really need to be more systems approach and take this holistic approach to not to categorize us in these different sections that indeed put all people who are minoritized or marginalized in a list of issues that need to be somehow not forgotten, but also not really remembered. So I think that what human rights bring to this discussion in general, and that includes also the rights of children, is to ask us for an approach that kind of takes into account everyone just based on their humanity, so that we don't have this categorization that we have also seen here in COP30, where the indigenous peoples are constantly demonstrating outside of the venue and not being really included in any serious discussions. So I think there are a lot of people in these venues who are asking for a more strong human rights approach, but it is still missing because we have so much kind of technical issues that we are addressing and dealing with, and this big picture seems to kind of slip away. That's what I would say. Sorry for being a bit critical here.
Thank you. You're right as a panelist, absolutely. Colleagues from the audience, any questions for our panelists? Well, I'm coming.
Thank you. I'm Iris from Seaweed. So systems thinking usually focuses on institutions and frameworks. What are the mechanisms that make it possible to be inclusive, so that the voices of the marginalized communities are included in those processes?
If you agree, then I would start, right? Or
yeah, please.
Okay, I think this is an excellent question, and really to the point that I want to raise here, that if we have that, this is kind of my small addition to this discussion of systems thinking, that I don't think systems as a word, systems thinking is enough. And I come from sustainability science in the humanities, and I think in sustainability science, it's a kind of very progressive approach, is the systems approach. But I don't think it's progressive enough, because I think that from that kind of framework, this holistic approach is missing. And the holistic approach would mean that we would have everywhere mechanisms to make sure that there is no talking about marginalized voices when we talk about sustainability, but instead we would have everywhere and in every place kind of integrated approach to kind of understand the complex situations we are facing. And I don't think we are going to solve any of our sustainability problems if we don't understand that there's a lot of different kind of knowledges out there, and it's not enough if we take the kind of only the kind of traditional systems approach, which is basically consisting of kind of engineer knowledge about structures, and then political knowledge about structures. And this kind of diversified knowledges that the indigenous peoples would bring about what actually means to create a world that is sustainable. We are ignoring it because we kind of think that it's too complicated and too far away, or it doesn't satisfy certain expectations that we have for the world. So I think that this that the solution would need to be that we integrate this kind of holistic approach to the systems approach.
Okay. Thank you. Jorge, do you want to add to that, or Do we have another question in the
Sure.
audience? Yeah, please, over to you, Jorge. I'm looking at the audience. Raise your hands.
Yes, no, very, very briefly. As I said earlier, I mean, if you are not sitting on the table, you are part of the menu. And unfortunately, we tend to talk about vulnerable groups without having them on the sitting on the table. So I think, I mean, the example before about indigenous groups. I mean, yes, there are indigenous groups, I understand, demonstrating outside, but how many of them are in the blue zone and how many of them are sitting in the negotiation table? So I think there is still a long journey to really integrate vulnerable groups and to really integrate the feedback from communities in our systems thinking. I mean, it's not just thinking; it's also doing. And this doing is in the day-to-day. In when we organize workshops, who do we invite? Who do we give voices to? Is particularly important. I will stop here. I don't know. I cannot see the room, but I presume that there might be more questions.
Thank you, Jorge. I'm looking at the audience. I think that we have one question from another Jorge. Seems to be a common name here. Huh? Please.
Too many George in the table. Yeah. No, just a question about watershed committees, because here in Brazil they are increasing a lot, and a part of the money, all the money collected from water users goes to the committees, and the committees, they manage that money, they decided about the watershed plan and things like that. And supposedly, of course, we can discuss about representation, or if everybody is represented in the watershed committee, but it is formed by government, water users, and NGOs. So we have a structure, a governance structure with money, with power to do a lot of things inside the basin. I want to know if in other sides, in other places, the same thing is happening. I know that the Brazilian model is based on the French model, more or less. Yes, it's a little bit different, not the same, but based on. And what do you think about that? Is it enough?
Thank you. Are there any reflections from an Arctic example, from Finland, for instance, or from the wash sector worldwide? Rita,
so
please.
in Finland, it's quite scary that actually the water hydropower companies own the lakes which they use the water from, so that the local communities and local people also outside the indigenous areas have nothing to say about how they use the water, whether the water goes up or down, how much water they are using. So I think it's in general a big problem, the privatization of such goods that should be kind of managed in commons. And I think that this is one of the big issues that also would need to be discussed, and certainly is discussed here in COP, that how we kind of are going to go about if we are about protecting our waters. So what is the role of privatization, and how can we make the private actors accountable?
Thank you. Privatization of the global commons. Jorge, and from your side, Jorge online from UNICEF, if you have a reflection on that.
Maybe a quick reflection. Also, I think connects very well with the previous questions, and connects also very well with where we are at the moment at the Water Pavilion. So allow me to be a bit biased. We are celebrating the 30th COP, but I think it is the 5th time that there is a water pavilion at COP. Does it mean that for 25 years there hasn't been discussions around water in COPs? No, but most likely the water community, I believe quite represented in today's audience, might not feel completely represented, or might not have been completely represented in previous COPs until we had a physical space, and it's not just a space, it's also the people, the water community coming together in this water pavilion to really bring the voices of the entire sector in the climate negotiations. So I think it's a very good example of how the water and the climate communities, they need to be together physically in the same space in Belém, and they need to talk to each other. So to me, it is not just, as I said, having the seat on the table. That's to me basic, but it's also being able to create the spaces, to have these regular communication channels between different groups, different interest groups. I think the example that the other Jorge was giving about watersheds. Often you have different interest groups, sometimes with competing priorities, and they all need to be heard because they all need water. We all need water. But again, creating the space and creating these dialogues is fundamental. And at least our experience when working with the water and the climate sectors in a given country is quite positive. At the beginning, there is fragmentation. We see that people speak even different languages, but very soon both the climate sector stakeholders and the water sector stakeholders, they realize that the problems, the solutions are joined. So water is at the center of the climate crisis, but water can be also a solution, a key solution in this. So giving the example of water and climate, I think is also an example for water resource management, for watershed kind of stakeholder consultations to really create the space and to really give voice to everybody involved in the sector. To me is fundamental for ensuring a healthy sector and a healthy coordination and collaboration between the different sectors or subsectors.
Just a quick comment that in Brazil, by law, water is a public good. So the services related to water or the abstraction and use, you need to have an authorization of the state to do that. So it's impossible. And for example, we have a huge discussion with some groups about the privatization of the water supplying sector and sanitation, and what should be from state or a private company is the one that will abstract the water, treat it, and serve for the population, supply the population, and the same with the sewage. So it's a little bit different of the privatizations of the natural resources or things like this, in my perspective.
Yes, thank you very much. It's an important addition. So it's the service that is privatized and not the resource itself, which seems to be different in other countries, as we learned. Actually, in some religions, it's also a fundamental aspect that water is part of the commons. I think it's written in the Quran and many others, but our professor for culture might know much better. Any last statement? Because we have to keep the time. There's always the next event coming. I would like... Rita, do you have any last reflection for us for this moment, or should we call it a day?
I just want to thank you for being here. It's really lovely that we had audience, and thank you for being active. So thanks. And thank you for inviting me also.
Thank you. It is very important to listen to all the voices, also from colleagues not from the water sector directly. Jorge, a very short closing statement from your side. I mean, Jorge online.
Yes,
Oh, yeah, you have one, please.
Yes, I mean, just to reinforce that we are in this together. We are in this together, all of us, private sector, public sector, civil society organizations, academia, and we need to establish linkages, and we need to work more collaboratively. And of course, part of the topic of today's discussion about inclusiveness, we need to make sure that those who are often not heard or not heard enough are really heard in these conversations.
Super, thank you so much. This was a nice closing statement. Colleagues, it's the first day of the second week. Have some stamina, stay in there. The decisions are taken on Friday if you're here the whole week, and I wish you a successful COP for water and climate. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.